tonight, Finance Minister says he's put 12.2 billion cedis in your pocket as he commits to a disciplined and responsible spending in the 2020 election year.
We have put monies either directly or indirectly into the pockets of many Ghanaians. The question that should be asked is what social interventions did the NDC implement in their 8 years in office to reduce the suffering of Ghanaians?
But NDC minority says the budget lacked substance.
This budget is misaligned. It is taking Ghana nowhere. Nowhere. We are going nowhere under this administration because this budget, excuse my French, is empty.
This is Top Story with Evans Mensah.
And Top Story is always brought to you by Bond Savings and Loans. Your success, our passion. Vodafone, the future is exciting. Ready. Gassem Cement, the nation builder. And Antate Furniture, designed for life. 12.2 billion cedis in your pocket, directly or indirectly. That is according to the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, who today presented the much anticipated election year budget. There were no new taxes imposed. Rather, the Finance Minister announced some enhanced reliefs for families, including an upward review of the marriage relief, child education relief, and old age relief, which were last adjusted in 2015. What are these exactly? We'll get into that. The minority in Parliament has already dismissed the budget as empty. We will hear from them shortly. But first, let's examine the evidence the Finance Minister provides to back his claim that he has put 12.2 billion cedis in your pocket. Joseph Akable is in the studio with details of that. First, just to clarify that the 12.2 billion cedis figure covers a period of 3 years from 2017 to date. So according to the Finance Minister, in 3 years, government has put that much in your pocket. Joseph, which areas exactly did he specify the amount had come from into our pocket?
And so the first is free SHS, and says parents have been saved an amount of 1.8 billion cedis in the last 3 years. Planting for food and jobs has saved farmers 844 million cedis. There is also that of 357 million being put in the pockets of teacher trainees in the form of allowances. A total of 336 million have been put into the pockets of nursing trainee within the last 3 years, also in the form of allowance. And subsidy for BEC registration fee has saved parents a total of 65 million cedis over the last 2 years, and that is money in their pockets, the Finance Minister stressed. It goes on to say that electricity tariff reductions effected by the PRC effective March 15, 2018 resulted in savings of 1.8 billion for a year for residential and non-residential customers, and this is money in their pockets.
So that's the first time we're hearing that figure. We know subsequently there was an upward review, but it says that during that period when the reduction happened, that is the amount that it claims that will save families. Okay.
Yes, it goes on to talk about the reduction and abolition of taxes, including 50% reduction in import duty. It says that saved taxpayers a total of 4.1 billion cedis over the last 3 years. It goes on to say that 350,000 jobs.
That import duty one is a very interesting one. This is the tax that when it was announced, the Abosokai folks were really excited and was jubilated. We sent our cameras there.
Yes.
Today we sent the cameras there again. There's some complaint that it hasn't necessarily translated into monies in your pocket. I mean, of course, we'll speak to the Finance Minister about how these were computed and whether it's indeed reflecting in people's pockets as he's claimed today.
Yes. The other one has to do with jobs that have been created in the public sector, including 100,000 for NABCO graduates. They said this has provided total earnings for them of 2.9 billion. And he stresses again that that is money in their pockets. And so in terms of the breakdown, there's a final one. He said we should not also forget that government has, through the financial sector cleanup, saved the deposits of 4.6 million depositors who would otherwise have lost their deposits. So this amount obviously is numbers in terms of the number of depositors involved, saying that they would have otherwise lost their deposits, but that has been saved as well.
So that is the Finance Minister's evidence. The key question to ask is, do you feel at least part of that 12.2 billion in your pocket. You can send me your WhatsApp 0244 340437 tonight. Also, today, when the finance minister addressed the House, he declared 2020 as a year of roads. Listen to him.
Today, the cry everywhere is about the poor state of our roads. It is an unprecedented cry, and it makes you wonder where all the roads in the NDC Green Book are. Mr. Speaker, this is why we are going to focus more on fixing our roads across the country in 2020. To get the road sector moving and contractors back to work, government will pay 80% of all contractors. Mr. Speaker, we have identified critical roads across each of the 60 regions, and construction will begin on all these critical roads. Cocoa Board has also secured funds to continue ongoing and new cocoa roads. Work on these roads will also commence soon. As part of our new initiative to complement the traditional execution of road projects, we have launched, Mr. Speaker, the Accelerated Community Road Improvement Initiative. Ghanaians want action on our roads, not words or plans, but what has been done. We intend to swing into action, and the work has already begun so that the talking will cease. Mr. Speaker, with this large number of roads to be constructed, the year 2020 can aptly be described as the year of roads, along with a focus on all ongoing flagship projects.
Ahead of the 2020 budget, one of the key concerns of many analysts and economists was what tends to happen in election years when government tended in the past to blow the budget out of the water in terms of the spending, and subsequent to the election, the years post that spent trying to now deal with the challenges of overspending in an election year. Well, the finance minister spent quite some time addressing what they intend to do to avoid that same pitfall in 2020. He says they will be disciplined and responsible in their spending.
I would like to take this opportunity to inform this August House on behalf of the President that all the needed resources required shall be marshaled for the Electoral Commission to ensure that we have credible, free, and fair elections. Ghana remains one of the most stable and peaceful countries in the world, and we intend to maintain it. In spite of the year being an election year, Mr. Speaker, let me repeat that President Akufo-Addo and his government would ensure that the perennial excessive spending during such periods will not happen in 2020. We shall work within the 2020 appropriated resource envelope and adhere to the Fiscal Responsibility Act to maintain fiscal discipline. We will do so not because we are complacent of our chances. No, we will do so because the nation needs it, and we are not prepared to throw away all the sacrifices and gains the people and their government have made in the last 3 years. We shall consolidate our macroeconomic gains and offer businesses and households the predictability and stability that they need to manage their lives.
In the studio with me is a former deputy finance minister. He's also the ranking member and minority spokesperson on finance. Kesata Forsing, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Forsing. Also joining me right now on the telephone is a deputy finance minister, Charles Edubwahing. Mr. Edubwahing, thank you for your time here on Top Story.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to start.
Good evening to your audience.
Yes. I want to start with the 12.2 billion CDs the finance minister claims today he's put, or the government had put, in our pockets. And we just did the breakdown. He talks, for example, about electricity tariff reductions that he claims amounted to 1.8 billion between in March 2018 until recent adjustments upwards again. He talks about the reduction and abolishing of taxes, which he again says amounted to 4.1 billion CDs that he says again found its way into people's pockets. how did he come by these figures? Because today we sent our cameras back to Abosokai, and the concerns there were, yes, the taxes and were reduced on the import duties, but they haven't felt it yet in their pocket. So can you explain that?
Is the question addressed to me?
Yes, Charles.
Yeah, sure. I think it's actually quite easy to determine these figures. The taxes that were abolished were taxes that had been in place prior to our coming into office. And we knew the revenue that was being generated from these various tax buckets according to the fiscal tables. So it was quite an easy calculation to determine the amount of cash we were giving up, which by eliminating these taxes. Of course, by inference, if we are eliminating these taxes, then that money that would have come to government is going to go somewhere else. Logically, it's going to go into the pocket of the importer, who was the one who was bearing the brunt of these taxes in the first place. So that is exactly how these calculations were done. Of course, we cannot assume, or we had to make some assumptions, one being that the importers were going to import the same amount of goods and were going to stay in the same business. If for some reason or the other they decided to change businesses or reduce the volumes of imports, then of course they may not have realized the quantum of savings that we had estimated. But it was a very defendable exercise because we had the history of the amounts that were being generated from these taxes to be used as a base to determine exactly how much space we're giving up.
What about the PURC tariff reductions? You say since March 15, 2018, the savings resulting from there is 1.8 billion for residential and non-residential. That is huge, and if that's true, all of us should have felt it. I'm just wondering again, can you break it down how that figure was arrived at?
I think it's also the same exercise. The PRC has some very good data about the total amount of gigawatt hours that are consumed across the board every year and even down to the month. So month-to-month figures, they know exactly how many gigawatt hours or kilowatt hours we consume, both on the residential side and on the corporate side. So they know that if I adjust the tariffs for the bracket of, let's say, the people who consume between 200 to 500 megawatts, which typically, I have in that bracket, I have a consumption of maybe 2 million megawatts, and today I've reduced the tariff by 5%. Then I just multiply the total tariff reduction, the total amount of megawatts consumed by the 5% reduction to come across the savings figure. You have to remember that, you have to divide that 1.2 billion number across the total number of people that consume electricity across the whole country. And, I don't know what that number exactly is, but if you take a guess or assume that, we are 28 million people, and you even assume 4 people per household, that is 7 million households that, you would have to share that 1-point-something billion across. If you do that calculation over the last 6 to 8 months, you realize that even though it's quite significant, on the per capita basis, it is not that much. But I have to say, I, as a private citizen, I do recall a time in the past when I had to, buy electricity almost every 2 weeks. I mean, my meter was running so fast. I think even Hussein Bolt was not, we couldn't even have been able to beat that record. Today, I don't buy electricity as much, so I feel it in my pocket. I mean, in my house, I think now I buy the same amount of electricity, but once a month. What I was buying every 2 weeks, now I'm buying once a month. And so that, for me, really is an indication on a personal level the kind of savings we've seen in terms of electricity tariff, and I'm sure you can attest to that yourself.
Well, I'm trying to get my viewers, my listeners, to tell me what they feel themselves. But Mr. Toforsing, first time in a budget, as I can recall, where the finance ministry now quantifies, because every time the budget is read, the retort is, all these fantastic figures, where is it in our pocket? The finance minister now is saying, we can quantify it in your pocket, and it's 12.2 billion. He's trying to explain how they arrive at the figures. Do you accept the figures?
Evans is laughable in the sense that I heard my colleague, the current Deputy Minister for Finance, making that claim. Evans, a number of points.
Mr. Foster,
he's talking about tax revenue.
Can we stay out of the superlatives and focus?
He's talking about tax
issue.
revenue.
If you align briefly, and then
his point is that they have relieved a number of taxes, and as a result, they have been able to save the nation some amount of money. Strangely, the same administration has failed to quantify the taxes that they have imposed since they came to office, and the fact that that is also taking money from people's pockets.
Okay, I want to quickly rectify this for you. We could just let's rectify the sound from that particular microphone.
Yes,
yes, you're making a point.
So you can't hear me now.
No, fantastic. Yes, loud and clear.
My point is simple. I'm saying that you will make a mistake, and I said it's laughable in the sense that, in as much as you are talking about how much you're giving to people, you should as well quantify how much you've taken from people. In the sense that when this administration took office, they have imposed a number of taxes. An example is the luxury tax levy. Okay, it has subsequently been reviewed and been taken off. But during the period, they took money from people's pocket. Why are they not quantifying that? The second point is the fact that the same administration decided to decouple the National Health Insurance levy and then the Ghana Education Trust Fund levy. In effect, I've heard AGI complaining to the fact that it has increased the cost of doing businesses. Okay, AGI is not for the Christmas. They have actually passed it on to the ordinary Ghanaian. In doing that, you have to assess the incidence of those taxes. The incidence is certainly not with the businesses. The incidence is with the customers. So you have taken money from these customers as well. Why are they not actually quantifying them? We are aware, and I heard him talk about fuel, the fact that they decided to subsidize electricity bills of about 1.8 billion, and so they've given. Has he forgotten that over the period, fuel prices has also been going up? How much have you taken from these people? How much have you taken from the ordinary Ghanaian as a result of fuel prices increased from 2017 to date? You have to quantify all of this. So you make one-sided argument if you look at the fact that you have only talking about what you've given to people. But even that, which administration in recent past hasn't given SHS subsidy? A basic BEC subsidy.
No, everybody has done absolutely free before.
But no, I'm talking of BEC subsidy, okay. And it's part of what they talked about.
They mentioned that, yes.
The BEC subsidy has been there. We've been paying BEC subsidy. We paid some element of free SHS. So what is he talking about? So please, I mean, it's laughable for them to come out with an argument that they've given 12.2 billion Ghana cedis. In the coming days, I'm also going to quantify how much they have taken out from ordinary Ghanaians' pockets. And it will surprise you to know that amount will be far in excess of what they are claiming that they've given out to the ordinary Ghanaian. Please, let us not go into that kind of argument, because the government cannot win. The government cannot win because they have given so much money. They have taken so much money from the ordinary Ghanaian than what they claim they have given to the ordinary Ghanaian. No wonder Ghanaians will not feel it.
Let's talk about something that was fundamental to the budget today, Charles Dubois, which is the revenue versus the expenditure. One of the key things the Finance Minister said today was that they're going to be disciplined and stay within the budget deficit. In fact, Case Dr. Forsing had accused you this week, the government, of manipulating figures so that you can stay within the limit of 5%. Mr. Dubois, I see your budget and I see that you are estimating grants and revenues to be 67 billion cedis, and your expenditure is 84 billion cedis. That gap, how are you going to finance that gap, and doesn't that start the challenge of a budget deficit already for 2020?
Thank you. Before I answer that, let me just clarify something. My good friend Atu Forson mentioned the luxury tax. Yes, the luxury tax, we imposed the luxury tax, but we quickly scrapped it. And to be honest, it was only 100 million odd that we generated from that luxury tax. So really and truly...
You took the 100 million from the ordinary Ghanaian. So take it out from your 12 billion.
No, please. The luxury tax was not applied to the ordinary Ghanaian. I don't think the ordinary Ghanaian drives a 4.0 liter
Mr. Charles, but I didn't want to go there. But once you've gone there, you know that when you say luxury and you measure it by cylinders, you could buy a 2020 car. Let's say 1999 car. That would be that liter. In 2019, when it was applied, you pay a luxury vehicle, but that's not a luxury vehicle.
That's exactly why we scrapped it, because the definition was not specific, and that's why we scrapped it.
But isn't it right to acknowledge what he makes the point there, that if you are calculating how much you put in our pocket, then you must also be fair to tell us how much you've taken out. For example, CST is taking some out. Fuel prices that have gone up over the period has taking some out.
We mentioned that in the budget, in the president's in the minister's statement. He said, "Look, despite the increase in CST and some of these other taxes, we still net have put this amount in people's pockets."
Oh, so the 12.2 is a net figure.
And in fact, a good indicator of if you have seen an increase in price in incidence of a tax, which has been translated to people in terms of what if they felt it, will be an increase in price levels. And your consumer price inflation data will show. And you will see that your CPI numbers have actually gone down rather than up. So that means that prices have not increased. If people had felt a branch of a tax, meaning that the tax was increasing, they would have in turn increased their prices, and you would have seen your CPI data reflect that. So please, let's look at the numbers and see what the statistics is telling us, and make determination based on that.
Please clarify.
And hypothesis. You know, the evidence is clear.
Yes.
You know, we've never seen inflation declining at the rate in which it's declining today. Today, people's purchasing power is a lot more than it was 3 years ago. And that is what is important. What can your CD buy you today? What can you put in your pocket? That is what you have to worry about, your purchasing power. And you can maintain or increase your purchasing power if you manage your inflation and you're fiscally disciplined, which is what we are doing.
Now, just on a fiscal discipline bit, I'll come to that. But that was my substantive question. But please clarify me, the 12.2 billion, is that the net amount you put in our pocket?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that's a net.
No, but that'd be net. I think the numbers he gave out, he was specific, and if you tally, there's no deduction from that, so it can't be net. And so I'll challenge him to come out again.
It was deduction.
You see, so how much have you?
He's explaining your point.
Okay. My argument is simple. I mean, you should tell me how much they've taken from the ordinary Ghanaian in terms of fuel price increases. You should give me that specific answer and then deduct it from how much he has. Then obviously we can make an argument and make some. And then tell me how much they've taken from the ordinary Ghanaian, from the CST, as much as how much they've taken from the ordinary Ghanaian in terms of the decoupling of the National Health Insurance Levy and then the Ghana Education Trust Fund Levy.
Oh, then in that case, my brother, then I should add how much we've increased people's salaries by, which has been 12.5% for 2020, over 10% last year.
And then apply inflation. And apply CPI, inflation, and deflate it accordingly.
And then I'll also apply inflation to the price of petrol at the pump. So we can do all that, because now there's not a problem. So easy. So what you have to do is look at the isolated incidents of new policies that we have introduced, not your normal day-to-day stuff that we would have done anyways. And that is what we are attributing to. PSHS, restoring teacher training allowances, NAPCO, these are new policies of our government that are new and that have actually had a direct impact. Elimination of nuisance taxes, these are new policies. That's what we are saying, that let us focus on what we are doing differently.
Okay, Mr. Aduban, you were talking about, I asked a fundamental question earlier about the discipline, and I'm looking at the figures. You're going to bring in less in grants and revenue, but you're spending far more, 84 billion as against 67 billion. That is a warning the minority had raised and say, with that revenue shortfall, you cannot realistically expect to stay within the band of less than 5%.
First and foremost, Evans, I don't know of any year, and maybe Mr. Forson, who has a lot more experience than I do, may be able to correct me. But I don't know any year in the recent history where, as a country, we have generated more revenue than we've spent. We've run a deficit every single year. The question is, how big is your deficit, and what are you using the borrowing that you borrow to do? because what we do is we have a deficit budget, and this is what we run. Last year we had a deficit. The year before we have a deficit. When we inherited the economy in 2017, we inherited a deficit over 9% at the time. So basically, we've always run a deficit. But the problem is, what exactly are you using the excess expenditure for? If you are using it for productive sectors of the economy, which then translate into GDP growth, then you are justified. So as long as I am running a deficit of under 5%, but I'm generating GDP growth of 6, 7, 8%, then net, I am moving in the right positive direction, because I'm borrowing at a lower rate to generate productivity, which is an increase in income, which is at a higher rate than what I'm borrowing at. So net, I stay positive. And that is how you maintain debt sustainability, because you always are increasing or you're maintaining a surplus. That's not what the NDC was doing. The NDC were churning out, 9% deficit, but had anemic growth of 2.2 or 3%. So therefore, net, they were much worse off. And that's why you had your debt stock skyrocket over 73% as a percentage of GDP. So really and truly, what you should be worried about is exactly how you are translating this additional expenditure into the productive sectors of economy, and you're generating the growth. And you have to admit that since we came in, we've maintained average GDP growth in excess of 6 or 7%. In fact, this year actually, the IMF is touting Ghana to be the fastest growing country in the world.
One of the fastest growing, not the fastest growing.
Sorry, one of the fastest growing. That I think is still commendable at 7%. So clearly, we must be doing something right, and we must be spending on productive sectors of the economy.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Foster
Evans, 3 points. It is important for us to put this budget in perspective. And you asked a question about our press conference and some of the things we talked about. You heard Honorable Eduboahin making reference that amount of 1.8 billion Ghana cedis was actually given in a form of subsidy as electricity tariffs. As a result, in the fiscal, one would recall that you look at the subsidy line and confirm that if government has paid that amount. Government has paid that amount, obviously, but what they have done is that after paying, instead of them classifying it as subsidy and add it into expenditure, they've decided to treat it as amortization. And in doing so, and that is why I said that the treatment
what is amortization?
Amortization, simple put, is that repayment of debt.
Okay.
So it's like I've come for a loan and I'm paying I'm not servicing the debt, but I'm paying the principal. Okay. That's amortization. That treatment is unconventional, unorthodox, and not acceptable. In fact, in the IMF, Government Finance Statistics Manual 2014, it explains what amortization is. Unfortunately, they have decided to treat it differently, and I've said that they are misreporting. Apart from that, one fundamental mistake in this budget is that I've heard the finance minister touting that it's a year of roads. But you see, the numbers do not support it. You and I, we are actually contributing for the roads to be fixed through the purchase of fuel. So Ghana Road Fund is supposed to get an amount of about 1.7 billion Ghana cedis. Of this amount, they are only giving Ghana Road Fund about 1 billion Ghana cedis. Government has decided to take about 700 million Ghana cedis from Ghana Road Fund, and you are claiming it's going to be a year of roads. Where is the money going to come from? If you look at the appendices of the budget statement, the road sector investment is about 1.6 billion Ghana cedis. So 1.6 billion Ghana cedis from the Ministry of Roads, and you are telling me it's going to be the year of roads. Where is this roads coming from? Second point, you are telling me that you are going to borrow from the Eurobond market, and this is page 215 of the budget statement, appendix 3A. They said they are going to the bond market to borrow an amount of 17.155 billion Ghana cedis. And I track, where is this money going to go? Large of the money is going to consumption. In fact, capital expenditure in the budget, the domestically financed capital expenditure in the budget is 3.7 billion. Of this amount, the oil revenues is financing about 3 billion. So only 750 million Ghana cedis is left. You go and borrow about 17.1 billion Ghana cedis from the Eurobond market and use only 700 million for the purposes of infrastructure. What are you talking about? What kind of investment are you investing in the people of Ghana? And so we should clap for you. This budget cannot be a budget of hope. That is why I said it's empty. Virtually empty. Nothing is in there.
I'm grateful that you joined me. Quick, brief last words to you, Charles Dubai. Hello, Mr. Dubai, still there? I think I lost him on the line there. But thank you very much, to Fortune, for your time here on Top Story. You want to join us on News Night? We start right now as we